Okay, so today we're going to be talking about tips for landscaping on a budget. This topic was requested by a member of our Facebook private listeners group, so I'm really excited to do this topic because I love when I get requests for topics and it's something that I can do, and the season is right to talk about this topic, so it just was kind of fun to get to do this. So I have a list of some tips. I'm certainly no expert in landscaping, and if you are, you're probably maybe thinking some of the things I'm saying might not be ideal, but these are my tips that I have, or things that I have found in ways to save money on landscaping if you're trying to dedicate your money to something else other than landscaping for whatever other goals you're trying to reach, but you still want your yard to look decent and you want to save money where you can. So the first tip that I have is simply just to neaten things up. This is really basic. Don't worry, I'm going to get into other tips, but I thought this was probably most important to just share, as far as even if you're on a really tight budget and you have really limited funds to spend, just going out and doing some cleanup can make a really big difference. It doesn't cost anything to pull weeds, prune bushes, rake some leaves. You can consider relocating some plants that maybe aren't doing well in their current location to a spot that would be better for them. I think sometimes what happens is when we feel like we don't have any money dedicated, or like money set aside to put to a certain project, we feel like we can't really address that situation or that project because we don't have any money to put to it. So then we can kind of ignore it. Not we can kind of ignore it. We can sometimes tend to ignore it because we don't want to get involved in something that's going to wind up costing money when we don't have money allotted for that. But if you just jump in and know that you're not going to spend any money, but do the best that you can, with just straightening up and making things look neater, and maybe just doing some manual labor, digging things up, moving them around, pulling out weeds, just anything like that, it can really make a big difference. Just that simple cleanup of an area just to kind of make it look nicer. So I definitely wanted to mention that as a tip. And if you do, if you are able to do a cleanup, and then maybe you can even just do something like add a little bit of mulch to kind of like touch it up, that makes a big difference too. And most of the big home improvement stores like Lowe's and Home Depot have sales on mulch certain times of year. I don't recall if it's both of them, but I know that at least one of them, I think it might be Lowe's, but I'm not 100% sure. But I know one of them always does like a big mulch sale on Memorial Day weekend. So that's always an option. I think it could definitely probably be cheaper to buy mulch like in bulk and have it delivered to your house. That's more on a cost per though. If you're just trying to do a really low budget little touch up, you're probably better off just buying the few bags on like the Memorial Day sale where you get, I forget, it might be like 5 bags for $20 or 4 bags for $20 or something like that. Like I said, the price per is probably cheaper if you're getting like a delivery, but if you're just trying to make things look neat and just do a little touch up here and there, you're probably not going to want to spend money on getting a huge mulch delivery if you're on a really tight budget. So my next tip is about flower containers. So for flower containers, the one tip that I have is to consider planting your containers with seeds, with fast growing annuals to fill your flower buckets. Like for if you have like containers that you use like to decorate your yard, you can fill several containers with flowers for a couple of dollars. You need a little bit of patience because you're not going to get that instant gratification of planting already flowering annuals that you'd pick up at the garden center. But it can be really fun to watch the seeds as they begin to sprout and then as they grow and eventually begin to flower. So like some fast growing annuals that I've done before are zinnias, nasturtium. I don't really know how to say that one, but it's like Nasturtium. I've grown them before. I just don't know how to say the name properly. And then cosmos. Those are ones that I've done that grow really quickly. The cosmos aren't great, I don't believe, for containers. We've done them like in the ground, but the other ones I've definitely done in containers, and they definitely grow pretty quickly. You just plant the seeds, make sure you keep watering them, and follow whatever instructions are on the packet. And they do grow pretty quickly, and they'll fill a bucket, so you can have a nice bucket full of flowers, for like, I don't remember what a seed packet costs, but they're really inexpensive, like probably like maybe $2 maybe in that neighborhood, rather than buying like a huge flat of plants at the garden center, which can get pretty expensive when you're trying to fill multiple buckets. And then the nasturtium, whatever they're called, the bonus with them is they're actually edible and they can be put in salads. I actually haven't personally done this, but you definitely can. And I'm growing them this year, so maybe I might give that a try. But that's always kind of pointed out whenever you read about them, or it might even say it on the seed packet, but you definitely can. They're edible. So that's that tip. Another tip is just about trying to find plants on clearance. I'm not sure if all garden centers do this, but I know definitely that Lowe's has a clearance section for plants in their like garden area. And you can often find plants that are perfectly fine, that just look a little bit beaten up. So they're not the ones that the people are going to choose. Like when they're going to look at the flowers, they're going to pick the ones that look the nicest. So the ones that get kind of beaten up or have a few leaves that died, or got dried up or whatever, they put them on the clearance rack. And you can get really good plants at a really good discount if you're willing to just take them and clean them up a little bit and then give them a little bit of time to grow back into their nice self. We had done this in the fall, but I've done it many other times, but most recently we did this in the fall. We got a bunch of mums. They were like $1 each, and we planted a bunch of buckets for the make like a nice little fall display in our backyard, like on our patio. But what happened is they had some like flowers that had finished blooming or whatever, and they kind of had like dried up, so they didn't look that great. But we got them super cheap, just cut off the couple dead flowers, planted them. They grew really nice. They lasted like a long time in the fall, and it was really great. And then I've also have some hydrangeas that were looking kind of scrappy that were on a clearance rack when I bought them. This was a while ago, like years ago. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to get these. They were like super cheap, and I planted them, and hydrangeas are perennial. So, once they die for the season and they come back, like anything that didn't look quite right isn't going to look like that anymore. It's a brand new plant every year. Not a brand new plant, but it grows back every year. So, and they're really nice. They're like a really neat flower. It's not like a typical hydrangea that's like the ball. It's like they have like a really pretty like flat flower. And regardless, it's worth checking out to see if where you're shopping has a clearance rack for plants, because you can definitely get some good things there. So make sure to look for that. Another tip I have is to reuse a portion of your potting mix. Now, this is where professionals might hear me say this and think, what? You can't do that. But I do it every single year. I do buy new potting mix every year, but it's expensive, and I can't afford. I do a lot of buckets, containers, I do hanging baskets, and I really like planting stuff in containers and baskets. So it costs a lot of money to refill them with fresh potting mix like they say you're supposed to every year. At least I'm pretty sure that that's what anyone I've talked to has said. You should fill it with fresh soil, because the potting mix has all the fertilizer, and it only lasts like a period of time or whatever. But what I've been doing, and I have never had a problem, is I buy potting mix, about half of what I would need for all my containers, and I take what's already in the containers and I empty it out and like put it into a wheelbarrow. And you got to like break it up anyway, because it gets hard in the containers. And I just like break it all up and I put it in the wheelbarrow, and then I mix it with the new potting mix that I bought, and just kind of mix it all together. And then I put it back in the container, plant my stuff in there. I do add some fertilizer, like just like regular like general purpose Miracle-Gro. I'll like not like the sprinkle on kind, but like I have the kind that you put in like a watering can. It's like the granules, and you put them in, you mix it up with water, and then you water the plants with them. I do that like throughout the season, and I think that probably adds whatever maybe they might be missing from not having all fresh potting mix. But that's just a tip. It works for me. So that's what I do with the potting mix. Another tip is to split your perennials. So instead of buying new perennials, you can split many types of perennials, such as hostas, ornamental grasses I have that I've split. And you can, what you can do is you can literally split the plant, you dig it up, and you can divide it into 2 to 3 plants. You can kind of see when you dig it up, it's pretty obvious like where the plant would split apart. And you can make multiple plants with that one plant. Now, when you first plant it, they're going to be small, but they're going to grow back into a full-size plant. Like when you first divide them up, of course, they're going to be smaller. But you can really save a lot of money by just splitting some plants that you have, or if you just bought a couple of new ones, if you give them some time to grow over a couple of years, as they grow, then start splitting them instead of continuing to go out and buy more of the same types of plant. If you do a quick online search for what types of plants you can split, you'll find lots of information. And one listener in our Facebook group had mentioned that she was actually also able to save a lot of money with this method, but by getting splits of plants from a friend. So, you know, you might have someone who's really into gardening and might have some excess. You know, maybe they have a lot of plants that they're going to split just for like the health of them, because I think it's good to not let them like bunch up too much. So they might just want to share. So check, you know, with people you know. There's also local Facebook groups where sometimes people are willing to trade or like swap or even just get rid of stuff. So I would definitely recommend looking in those areas too if you don't have any that you can currently split, or you just purchased new ones and haven't been around long enough to do that. You can also grow plants from cuttings. So like this isn't actually just splitting them, this is like cutting off a piece of the plant itself. So some examples of plants you can do this with are hydrangeas, geraniums, butterfly bushes, and mums, but there's many more. And again, I would look online specifically how to do this for the type of plant that you're looking to grow, because they're not all done in the same method, but it's definitely a way to save money on landscaping your yard, because you're basically creating a new plant from what already exists. Another tip is to really just try to find low maintenance plants. You don't want to try and, you want to try not to get plants that require a ton of time and money to take care of. You don't want plants that require a ton of water. Of course, there's going to be certain things, like maybe if you're growing vegetables, or if, like I said, if you have annuals in buckets, like they're going to need to be watered a lot. But the stuff in the ground, I really try and keep things like hostas and, you know, ornamental grasses and things like that don't really require a ton of watering. They just kind of live off of what nature provides. And because the more water you have to use, it definitely it costs money. Like every time you're watering plants, it unless you have like a well, if you have city water, it costs a lot of money to water those plants. So you want to keep that in mind. And you also want a plant that's pretty hardy, that you can that you don't have to constantly buy lots of different fertilizers and soil additives and things like that. So just something to keep in mind, you know, when you're buying stuff, to just try and keep it simple. And they'll look really nice, and you won't have to worry about doing too much care or spending too much money to keep them nice. Another tip I have is, if you're doing hanging baskets anywhere, to consider planting your own. If you don't own baskets to plant, then of course there will be an initial investment to purchase them. But if you get ones that are decent quality, you can reuse them year after year. The ones that I have, I've had for many, many years, and I reuse them every year. The thing is that pre-planted hanging baskets can be really expensive. So if you already have baskets that you own that hang, you can pick up some like a combination of flowers that you want to put together in a hanging basket, and they'll help you at the garden centers too on like what ones do well in that type of container, and maybe what ones are like trailing that'll kind of go over the basket if that's what you're looking for. And it's much less expensive to just buy a couple of little plants and plant them in the container yourself. Like the hanging basket yourself, rather than buy like a pre-planted hanging basket, because they can get really, really expensive. So that's just another thing to think about. One other tip is to plant spreading annuals or ground cover, because planting things that spread and cover a lot of ground will save you time in weeding, and it'll also save on the cost of mulching. One spreading annual that I really love are Petunia Waves. They really cover a lot of ground, and they flower like all season, and they just look, I think they look really nice, but they definitely spread out a lot. But if you are going to look for something like that, they're not regular petunias. Regular petunias do not spread. They do to a certain extent, like they kind of like get a little bit bigger, but they don't like spread like the Petunia Waves do. They kind of send out these like long arms that flower, and it's only the waves, not the regular petunia. So if just mentioning that in case you were going to look for those, if you're not familiar with them, it's only that specific type. But there's other types of ground covers and plants that kind of spread out. Some flower, some don't, but it's worth asking, because it will definitely save you money in if you are going to mulch the beds. And then also, again, it's less work weeding, because they are going to spread out and cover a lot of the ground, so it'll block weeds from growing up. And then the last tip I have is to purchase some inexpensive lighting. So we have used rope lights and strings of lights to hang in different locations on our patio. I don't recall what the lighting that we have used cost, but I know it definitely wasn't a lot. I know that like one string of lights that we have had, it's got like cute little lanterns on it. It's like one of those like kind of like a string of lights you would have for like Christmas lights, like that type of light. And but it's got like little like lanterns that hang from it, and it's really cute. I think I might have paid like $10 at most at Target. A good time to pick them up is like on clearance, when they have when they're starting to get rid of like the summer stuff. If you take a look for anything like that, a lot of times you can find lighting and things like that on clearance. That's when I got those, and we've had them for a really long time, and it doesn't cost a lot, but it makes it look really nice. Like especially like on a summer night when you want to go sit outside and you have like the little lighting, it just makes it like a nice environment. They also have like inexpensive solar lights that you can just kind of stick into the ground in like flower beds around your deck or patio, things like that. So I hope some of these were helpful. This is not fully obviously my area of expertise is not landscaping, but these are just some things that I've done to save money on trying to make the yard look nice over the years. So I hope that this was helpful in some way. I did enjoy doing this episode, but I'm sure there's probably maybe other things. If you have other tips, feel free to share. I would love to maybe do another episode in the future on this topic if anybody has any other things that could be helpful to others. So if you would like to email me with any questions or suggestions, you can reach me at lolasfrugallife@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at lolasfrugallife. I also have a YouTube channel under the same name. The YouTube channel is the same as this podcast. It's just a video form of the podcast, but it's not like a live video. It's just listening to the podcast on YouTube if that format is easier for you to access. And I do also have a website with blog posts that tie into the show episodes. I just started getting those on. So that website is lolasfrugallife.com. You can also join our private listeners group at facebook.com/groups/lolasfrugallife. And if you enjoy this show, please make sure to subscribe. And if you can take a couple seconds to rate and review the podcast, that would be really helpful to me. It's supposed to really help with where the show turns up in search results and helps more people find it. So that would be really great if you could do that. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a really awesome day.